Here's a surprising fact. Only about 5% of people consider themselves naturally funny, according to a global study on personality traits. Yet, almost everyone wants to tell great stories. So, if you're not part of that 5%, does that mean you're doomed to be a boring storyteller? Absolutely not. In fact, research shows that humor isn't the most important factor in storytelling. Instead, stories that evoke strong emotions, like empathy, fear, or inspiration, are 22% more likely to be remembered than ones that rely on jokes. Think about it, what sticks with you more, a hilarious joke or a powerful moment that made you feel something real? In this video, we're going to break down why you don't need to be funny to tell a great story. I'll share proven strategies to capture attention, build tension, and make your audience feel deeply connected to your story, all without cracking a single joke. By the end, you'll learn how to use emotional depth, pacing, and relatable characters to leave a lasting impact. Ready to find out how? Let's get started. Chapter 1: The Myth of Humor. Why you don't need to be a comedian. A lot of people think you need to be funny to capture attention, but that's not the case. Think of movies like The Pursuit of Happiness or Schindler's List. Neither of these stories hinges on humor, yet they resonate deeply. The power behind these stories lies in their emotional depth, not comedic timing. According to a study by the National Academy of Sciences, stories that evoke strong emotions, such as empathy or sadness, are 22% more likely to be remembered. It's not the jokes people carry with them, but the emotions. So, instead of trying to land a punchline, focus on making your audience feel something. Vulnerability is another tool at your disposal. Brené Brown, a researcher who specializes in human connection, says, "Vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change." Let your audience see your authentic self. Share the struggles, the real moments, and the hard truths. These are the elements that make a story stick, not necessarily the funny parts. When people feel like they know the real you, they're much more likely to be invested in your story. So, instead of stressing over jokes, aim to connect. The heart of great storytelling isn't laughter, it's relatability. And trust me, that's something anyone can master. Chapter 2: The Power of Tension. Crafting unforgettable drama. Tension is a storyteller's secret weapon. Think about it, why do people keep turning the pages of a thriller or binge watching a drama series? It's because they're hooked by the tension, not necessarily humor. The key to building tension is pacing. You want to reveal information little by little, keeping your audience curious. Alfred Hitchcock once said, "There is no terror in the bang, only in the anticipation of it." In storytelling, this means that the suspense you build before a big moment is often more impactful than the moment itself. To create tension, use contrast. If everything in your story is high energy or emotional, nothing will stand out. You need quiet moments to set up the big reveals. Try using pauses when you speak. According to a study by the Journal of Verbal Learning and Verbal Behavior, people are more likely to remember information that follows a brief pause in speech. That silence builds anticipation, and what comes next will hit harder. A well-timed pause can turn a good story into a great one. So, when you're crafting a dramatic moment, slow down. Give your audience time to process and wonder what's coming next. Don't be afraid of silence, it's often the most powerful tool in your storytelling toolkit. Chapter 3: Evoking Emotion. How to make your audience feel something. A great story leaves an emotional imprint on its audience. If you can make people feel something deeply, whether it's joy, sadness, or inspiration, they'll remember your story long after it's over. In fact, research from Harvard Business Review shows that emotionally charged content is twice as likely to be shared compared to content that is simply informative. One technique for evoking emotion is sensory detail. When you tell a story, don't just describe the events, bring them to life by engaging the senses. Instead of saying, "It was a cold day," try, "The wind bit through my jacket, and my hands felt numb." By painting a vivid picture, you'll help your audience feel like they're in the moment with you. This technique taps into a concept called mirror neurons, which are brain cells that fire both when we perform an action and when we watch someone else perform it. By using sensory details, you activate these neurons, making your story feel more personal to the listener. Another powerful way to evoke emotion is through vulnerability. When you're open about your experiences, especially the struggles and failures, people connect with you on a deeper level. A quote from The Storytelling Animal by Jonathan Gottschall illustrates this beautifully. We are, as a species, addicted to story. Even when the body goes to sleep, the mind stays up all night, telling itself stories. You don't need to make them laugh to create a bond, just make them feel. Whether it's nostalgia, sadness, or inspiration, the emotional connection is what will leave your audience thinking about your story long after it's done. Before we move on to the next part, make sure to subscribe. I've got more valuable storytelling strategies coming up, and you don't want to miss them. Chapter 4: Characters that Stick. Make people care about your story's cast. One of the most important aspects of storytelling is creating characters that people care about. Even if your story doesn't involve actual characters, it's your job to make people feel connected to the individuals involved, whether that's you or someone else. According to research by psychologist Paul Zak, stories with strong characters trigger the release of oxytocin, a hormone that fosters trust and bonding. This is why we become attached to fictional characters like Harry Potter or Frodo Baggins. They make us feel something. You don't need to be funny to create this connection. You just need to make your characters real, relatable, and human. One effective way to do this is through showing, instead of telling. Rather than saying, "She was brave," describe what she did that demonstrated her bravery. Maybe she stood up for someone when no one else would, or made a tough decision that cost her dearly. By letting the actions speak, you make the character's traits feel authentic, not forced. Another tip is to give your characters flaws. Perfect people are boring, and no one relates to them. Think about some of the most memorable characters from books and movies. They're often flawed but redeemable. We see ourselves in their imperfections. As Ernest Hemingway said, there is nothing noble in being superior to your fellow man. True nobility is being superior to your former self. At the end of the day, it's not about making people laugh at your characters, but about making people care. If your audience feels invested in the people in your story, they'll stay with you until the very end. Chapter 5: The Power of Silence. Using pauses to increase impact. Silence is an underrated storytelling tool. You don't always have to fill the air with words to keep your audience engaged. Sometimes, what you don't say is more powerful than what you do. Studies show that people retain information better after a pause. According to a study by the University of Illinois, listeners remember 28% more when pauses are used effectively. When you stop talking for a moment, you create space for your audience to reflect. This is especially useful when delivering key points or emotional moments. Pauses also add drama. Take note of how actors use silence in movies. Right before a big reveal, there's often a pause. That moment of silence allows tension to build, so when the reveal happens, it hits harder. You can use the same technique in storytelling. Whether you're talking about a surprising twist or an emotional conclusion, give it a beat. Let it sink in. A pause can also help to highlight an important message. Let's say you've just delivered a crucial part of your story. Instead of rushing to the next point, stop. Let your words hang in the air for a second. That silence gives your audience time to absorb the gravity of what you've said. As writer Ursula K. Le Guin once remarked, the unread story is not a story, it is little black marks on wood pulp. The reader, reading it, makes it live. A live thing, a story. The same goes for your spoken stories. Silence allows the listener to breathe life into your words. So, don't rush, use pauses to create meaning. Before we wrap up, make sure to subscribe to the channel. There's a lot more coming on storytelling techniques, and you won't want to miss out.